All right, we're going to go ahead and kick things off. So thanks for joining us. I'm Tim Anderson, one of the senior research analysts at Bank of America, and this is a 20-minute fireside chat with J&J, a very short period of time to get through a lot of good content. So J&J is, you know, a leader in both the pharmaceutical and the med device space. John Reed, Executive Vice President, Innovative Medicines R&D, joined the company in 2023. Prior to J&J, he held executive leadership positions at Sanofi and Roche, serving on their respective executive committees. And he served as CEO of Sanford Burnham Medical Research Institute prior to moving to industry. I've known him for a number of years, certainly one of the more thoughtful R&D leaders, in my opinion. So, John, thanks for joining us.
Tim, great to be here today. Thank you.
I thought we could start off with some macro topics, again, looking at policy changes and other things that are happening. So FDA, fair amount of disruption, leadership turnover, changes at HHS, changes within CDC. From where you sit, is it having an impact? Are the people that you and your organization have dealt with changed remarkably?
Well, I'd say with the FDA first, really have to give a lot of praise and to the professionals there who've managed to really keep things moving forward despite the uncertainty and dynamic change. So far, our request for meetings, our deadlines have been met. I would say there seems to be more back and forth as we iterate on discussions and adjudicate various regulatory matters, but so far, you know, knock on wood, I think we've landed in entirely reasonable places for the most part. So, you know, so I think so far so good, but you know, there are obviously, you know, concerns about the flux of some of the talent in the agency and things like that.
One of the programs that the administration has proposed is this Commissioner's National Priority Voucher Program, where they'll take a new drug application and review it in as short as 2 months. They talk about a 1 to 2 month review timeline, which is remarkably fast relative to how long it normally takes drugs to get approved. So your thoughts on that? Is that a realistic possibility that some drugs could actually get approved that quickly?
I think technically it can be done, particularly if the FDA allows rolling in submissions. You know, we recently did that with our bladder cancer system in Lexo, where they granted us a specific designation where you could be feeding them pieces of the application piecemeal so that they could review it in real time. We're still wanting to learn more about it. It's declared to be something for top priorities in terms of national public health, and suggestions that it may also come with some commitments around prices that we need to understand, but find it intriguing and look forward to learning more about it.
Business development. So J&J is active in partnering and doing occasional acquisitions, as are most large pharma companies. With the uncertainty in the marketplace, how do you conduct business in this environment? Do you guys kind of put stuff on hold and are pausing what you're doing, or is it just business as usual from that perspective?
We're maintaining a business as usual attitude. You know, there's so many of the ideas being floated out of the administration are still ideas at this point. You know, I'd say the main thing that's been announced is that we are expanding manufacturing, particularly of biologics here in the United States, and we have announced some major commitments there, altogether committing $55 million over the next several years in a combination of R&D as well as expanding manufacturing capability. So I'd say that's probably the main thing that you've seen come out of J&J as a result of some of the changes. But from M&A BD, you know, really no change there. We continue to be very active there. The strategies are a bit different between pharma versus medtech, but in pharma we have really a unique platform, if you will, by which we source external innovation, where we have traditional, I would say, pharma-like BD, which tends to kick in at phase 1 and later. But to nurture that early space, we have this concept of innovation centers one here in Boston, San Francisco, London, Shanghai, together with J Labs, incubator facilities to help fresh ideas get off the ground, start young companies. JJDC, our venture capital arm, is the largest and longest standing in the industry. So we have a number of tools we can use to source external innovation. Our pipeline strategy is that we should invent about half of our medicines internally, and we resource internal discovery at a rate that would generate about one NME a year, and then get the second half of the pipeline through external innovation. And so that's pretty much where we're right now. 60% of our pipeline's coming from internal discoveries, but that remains very high priority, is to constantly be looking for external innovation opportunities, particularly in the kind of early space, to try to capture things when they're young before it becomes competitive and costs a lot. Now in medtech, it's different. You know, they tend to really focus on things that are more mature, even commercial stage or very close to commercial stage with their M&A activities.
Inflation Reduction Act kind of changes the incentives in R&D in certain ways. That came into effect prior to Trump 2.0. How has IRA impacted how you guys are running R&D, or has it not? Because there's, for example, the pill penalty that in principle shifts more of the focus and more of the reward on biologics. Has that changed the nature of the mix of programs you're pursuing or how you're running clinical trials?
I think the main thing, first of all, when it comes to target biology, we adopt a modality agnostic view. So we're not going to pick a large molecule or biologic over a small molecule because of IRA, whatever the biology demands. Having said that, I just got data that indicate as percentage of pipeline, J&J ranks #1 in the industry right now for the percent of the pipeline that's biologics. But I have to tell you, that's not by design. It's really by virtue of where the target biology has taken us. Probably the main thing that J&J is doing that might have been different in the past is that we're trying for medicines that have multiple indication opportunities. And this happens a lot in many of the areas we work in, whether that's immunology or neuroscience or oncology, where you have these, what I would call pipeline and product opportunities. Rather than sequentially developing them, we're trying as much as we can to do parallel development so that we can get those indications approved while that clock is still fresh. Now, you know, the degree to which you can do that is very resource dependent because these are resource intensive investments. So we can't always do it with everything that we'd like to, but in as much as we can, we're trying to do that. And we do put a lot of our development resource into line extensions and really getting the most out of the medicine, try to take it everywhere it can go and try to do that as proximally as we can.
Great. Okay, so focus areas, I think J&J commonly describes it as 3 main focus areas, and then you certainly have compounds in other areas. So oncology, immunology, neuroscience.
Correct.
Maybe we can just start with oncology, where the company's done a lot of remarkable things, especially in the area of blood cancers. I wanted to maybe start off with the multiple myeloma category, because there's so much innovation that's occurred there, and you guys have really, I think, spearheaded these developments, and you have compounds in so many different classes and modalities. So major products like Darzalex, which are absolutely a cornerstone of therapy. You've got CAR T therapy, cell-based therapies. Now you've got bispecifics. How do you juggle everything that's going on in the space? So I wanted to really maybe focus in on CAR T versus bispecifics, because they each offer benefit to patients. And one of the questions we've had is, can you take these complex CAR T therapies and move them upstream, move them out of academic centers into the community? Maybe you don't need to if you've got off-the-shelf bispecifics that are good enough. So if you could, maybe it's more of a commercial question almost, talk about the dynamic between things like CAR T and bispecifics.
Right. So no, thanks for the question, Tim. I mean, we can go a lot of different directions with it, but in the interest of time, just to say, okay, so J&J, we rank #1 in myeloma. You mentioned that. Actually, #1 overall in hematologic malignancies. 5 products have been brought to market, including the world's first proteasome inhibitor, Velcade, the first biologic, Darzalex, the first 2 T-cell engagers where you have bispecifics. They grab onto the myeloma cell with one arm into a T-cell, a killer T-cell with the other, and get the immune site, and then a best-in-class CAR T-cell targeting BCMA, one of the popular antigens. Really, the future is bringing these together in powerful combinations and trying to get into the early lines when we can capture the disease early. We really are envisioning now not just the aspiration to delay disease progression, but to actually go for cure. And some of the things that are suggesting we might be able to do that are found in both established data as well as coming data. You mentioned Carvykti, the CAR T. Even in late line therapies where patients have failed everything, we just showed at 5 years, a third of those patients after a single treatment are disease-free, no evidence. You can't, even with the most sensitive techniques, can't find any evidence of cancer still in the patients. They've had no additional therapy. When we get that now into the second line setting, about half the patients, same story. And now we're going into frontline where instead of the traditional autologous bone marrow transplant, asking whether CAR T instead could polish things off. In the newly diagnosed patients, our 4-drug regimen that we've developed for both transplant eligible and ineligible that has Dara, the CD38, and Velcade, that regimen has led to outcomes where the progression-free survival for transplant eligible is now estimated to be nearly 2 decades, 17 to 18 years, and for transplant eligible, nearly a decade, 8 to 9. When J&J started this journey, the average life expectancy of a patient with myeloma was 2 years. And now we're talking a decade or 2, and now we're actually thinking we could actually maybe cure this disease by bringing these medicines together. So the bispecifics that you mentioned in particular, we have really tantalizing data now, combining them with Dara, the CD38, in early lines where we're getting 100% minimal residual disease, MRD negativity. Remember last year, the FDA recognized MRD as a surrogate for progression-free survival, officially now recognized. That's how good it correlates. And on top of that, we have now moving into phase 3, a tri-specific, Romantomig, that has features of both of our bispecifics, Tec and Tau, but woven into one molecule. There we saw 100% complete response rates in heavily pretreated patients. So we feel like we're on the cusp of a next generation of regimens for myeloma that could literally drive us towards cures.
It is tip of the spear stuff. It's remarkable. Okay, we're going to shift into another area in oncology. This is a compound you probably have not gotten a lot of questions on, at least from folks in the investment community, which is this pasritamig. So a novel compound, it's a bispecific, it hits this novel target, KLK2. And what's remarkable is you've gone from a phase 1 trial where only recently did we see data to suddenly in phase 3 in prostate cancer, big unmet need. So do you want to talk about that molecule?
Oh, I'd love to talk about
it.
Yes, pasritamig. It had its debut at ASCO last year where we shared some of the early data. As you said, this is a bispecific. J&J is one of the leaders in bispecific antibody therapies. One arm grabs an antigen called KLK2. That was recognized by our team about a decade ago through some of our work in early external innovation as a fresh new antigen that is the most specific for prostate of anything that's been found so far. So unlike things like PSMA that is targeted by many, where it's also expressed in salivary glands and kidney, this is only expressed in the prostate and only on the prostate cancers. So with this bispecific that's grabbing the prostate cancer via KLK2 and then grabbing the killer T cells with another arm, CD3, we've been seeing really not only great efficacy, but great tolerability, suggesting that having this selective antigen is really paying off. I think we had maybe 15% of patients that had any CRS, cytokine release syndrome, and that was grade 1. No neurological events that have sometimes been associated with bispecific antibodies. We have a Q6 weekly dosing schedule, so it's very convenient. So we're really excited about this. So we've moved into a phase 3 in late line patients, but we've also designed and will be starting studies in earlier lines as well.
It is really remarkable, the tolerability, right? Because you've got good response rates in late line patients and then a very clean side effect profile. So we look forward to seeing how that compound progresses. Okay, you had a recent approval in oncology, so it goes under the brand name of Inlexzo. We commonly call it TAR-200. And it's a novel, it kind of marries up the device business and the drug business, and it's something that urologists can use for non-muscle invasive bladder cancer with really great results. And do you want to just kind of highlight that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is such a great story. First, in terms of the medical need, bladder cancer is the 8th most common type of cancer. Worldwide, there are about 600,000 people every year that get diagnosed with early bladder cancer. It appears to be confined to the bladder. Then there's another 400,000 that have already been treated but relapsed. So it's 1 million people a year are looking for a solution to save their bladder, because the alternative for all too many is they have the bladder surgically removed. And you can imagine what that does to quality of life. So the idea here is that this device is inserted through typical catheter, goes into the bladder, and it elutes cancer-fighting medicines with very controlled pharmacology for long periods of time. The first iteration that just got approved is pretty simple. It's just chemotherapy, gemcitabine. It lasts for 3 weeks. But even with that, in patients who had not responded to the frontline standard of care, a thing called BCG, 80% plus complete response rates, more than 80% complete, highest ever been achieved. And we have a next generation with another device that's got a targeted therapy called erdafitinib, where we're seeing 90+% response rates. So this really looks like a true game changer for bladder cancer. And it does bring together the expertise of pharma and med tech. This concept started with an acquisition of a local company called Taurus that had a prototype, needed a lot of optimization, the manufacturing, how to be automated, scaled, et cetera, et cetera. But with the collaboration between medtech and pharma, we then got that working at industrial scale, commercial quality, and then brought it forward as this first version of one of these intravesical, so inside the bladder, intravesical drug delivery systems. And we see this being a whole pipeline of opportunities. We've got these first 2 payloads, gemcitabine, erdafitinib, and then we're bringing others so that we can keep that bladder cancer under control and let those patients keep their bladder.
You'd mentioned line extensions. I'm not sure I'd call this a line extension, but it's a great way of taking an old product, which is off-patent gemcitabine, repurposing it and delivering great results.
Yeah.
So an interesting compound. All right, let's shift to immunology. I wanted to ask you about a compound called icotrokinra, which is an IL-23. So there's injectable IL-23s on the market today. One of the biggest drugs in the world, Skyrizi by AbbVie. What separates this program from the pack is that it's an oral. So it'll be the first pill-based IL-23. You guys are studying it not only in psoriasis, but also in inflammatory bowel. So do you want to kind of talk about that compound and what the path forward is? It's been filed, I think, for psoriasis. You guys will likely launch next year, is my guess.
Yeah, very excited about this. When you look across the autoimmune diseases, including the ones where the IL-23 class plays, psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis, Crohn's, colitis, at least something like 70% of patients who are eligible for a biologic are not taking one. And the 2 reasons cited top of the list is they don't want an injectable or they're worried about safety. With icotrokinra, we have a once-a-day oral pill with efficacy that rivals the best of biologics and a safety profile where we see more adverse events in the placebo arm of the studies than we're seeing on the treatment arm. We've now filed for psoriasis based on 5 phase 3 studies that we've done, which include head-to-heads against the leading TYK2 inhibitor. Those data are being presented this week, actually, at a meeting in Europe. and are now moving into late development or in late development for psoriatic arthritis, Crohn's, and colitis. So really excited about bringing this as a potential solution for patients. And when people wonder, gosh, how much do patients really want an oral? The studies have enrolled in 1/3 the time it normally takes to conduct these kinds of studies. So patients are voting with their feet. They want an option like this, and so we're super excited. Been a great collaboration. It's another one where we started very early with a biotech company in the Bay Area. They had a prototype, tried in the clinic. We needed to go back and refine. We spent 4 years working collaboratively with them to come up with optimized structures, and then the manufacturing, because this is a complex cyclic peptide, took a lot of heavy lifting by our process chemists to come up then with a process that could be scaled to the multi-kilogram scale with a good cost of goods, converted that from a solid state, expensive, one at a time kind of synthesis to a convergent solution phase synthesis, and now have this available soon, we hope, for patients. So very excited about this, and we're going to be doing more with that same concept of taking well-validated targets and offering an oral option. We have an oral IL-17 in the clinic right now, a true small molecule, and more of that kind of thing to come, Tim.
Yeah, the IL-17 that you mentioned, that is unique because that's small molecule, and the IL-23 is a peptide, so it'll be interesting to see what the proof of concept data looks like on that. In the area of neuroscience, you guys have done an acquisition recently of Intracellular Therapies, which gives you Caplyta, which is for depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, and you have a follow-on product to that, which is a deuterated formulation of that called ITI 1284. What does that bring to the table, having that deuteration and that change in formulation?
Yeah, there could be some changes in the metabolism of the small molecule. We're also doing a sublingual presentation with that one. We're going to be developing it for Alzheimer's, for psychosis associated with Alzheimer's, and for agitation associated with Alzheimer's. We know these are problematic symptoms of late-stage Alzheimer's patients. But as you said, Caplyta, the original compound, is what really excited us, obviously, that we took the plunge and spent several $1 billion to acquire Intracellular. It's got at least 3 pharmacological actions, but they're beautifully balanced so that you get best-in-class efficacy combined with great tolerability, and seems to be a broad utility player. Approvals already in schizophrenia, bipolar 1 and 2, depression. It's the only medicine approved in both 1 and 2. A beautiful data set with a PDUFA date later this month in adjunctive treatment of garden variety major depressive disorder. Really nice data in generalized anxiety disorder. So it seems to really have this ability to play across a whole variety of mental health disorders, which I think is really intriguing given that, we just, in countries like America, we just don't have enough psychiatrists to help with given the magnitude of the mental health burden. And so many people are trying to manage with their primary care physician, most of whom have no idea really what label or diagnosis and how to match that to a medicine. At least with Caplyta, you have a pretty good chance it works for so many things that might not be a bad place to start and see if you can eliminate the symptoms. And we have no weight gain, no sexual dysfunction, no tendency for tardive dyskinesia, the extrapyramidal effects. So really a nice benign safety profile. The only thing that's seen is some somnolence, but we say take it at bedtime. It's a once-a-day pill, so just take it when you go to bed.
Maybe we'll finish out the discussion. One last compound, this one in the cardiovascular space, milvexian.
Right.
So oral factor 11 in partnership with Bristol, and you and Bristol and Bayer are kind of neck and neck. Each have compounds in phase 3, and we're going to be getting some data at least from Bayer maybe around the end of the year. So these are novel oral anticoagulants meant to replace things like the factor 10s. And it's been a class where there's been some mixed data thus far, but very big opportunity. Just your latest view of this class and the category and how you would describe the riskiness of the approach.
Yeah, again, to sort of frame the medical need, there are 8 million people in America alone that are taking an oral anticoagulant to prevent thrombosis. But there's another 18 million who should be on an anticoagulant, but they're not because of the risk of bleeding. The idea behind milvexian as a factor 11 inhibitor is that you prevent the pathological blood clotting that leads to heart attacks, strokes, et cetera, but you still preserve the normal homeostatic mechanisms that prevent bleeding in normal tissues. So that's the bet we're taking with these. It's a huge opportunity. If you look at our lead indication, atrial fibrillation, there are 10 million Americans with atrial fibrillation today. And we're testing this hypothesis through well-controlled clinical trials that suggest that based on genetic and biochemical evidence that factor 11 is going to be a better way to go to get both efficacy and safety compared to the current class, the factor 10s, of which we have one ourselves, Xarelto. So that's the rationale behind it. We have carefully designed the program. We think we got the dose right. We use different doses for different indications based on the hemodynamic differences, 4 times higher, for example, in atrial fibrillation. And we'll know in about 2 years when we get enough events to unblind and see what where we've landed.
John, thanks for joining us today, and thanks to J&J for participating in the forum.
Thanks, Tim.